This is the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Podcast, Episode 18, Feeding Forages. I'm U of I Extension's Todd Gleason. Travis Mateer, Illinois Extension beef educator, now joins us to talk a bit about forages and cover crops. I'm wondering if you could tell us what resources U of I Extension has in this area.
I think the biggest one, Todd, is people. So we've got commercial ag educators stationed around the state that answer their phone and email, and we know these cover crops are probably a farm-by-farm prescription. There's just not one that fits everybody, and so having a conversation with us first and foremost is probably best. One of the most popular resources we do have, though, that's available that producers or farmers or growers could check out is the Quick Guide. It's just kind of a front and back sheet with cover crop options that lists the species and then a lot of the information that we get questions on as far as planting information for seeding rates, planting depths, expected tonnage, and then maybe some pros and cons of those different species. And so hopefully that Quick Guide, which is available online, is something that a producer could look at real fast and just kind of get themselves versed with the cover crop options, and then build a foundation for a conversation with their seed dealer or the consultant as far as what they need to plant. And then the other thing that I want to mention real quick is the Midwest Cover Crop Tool. It's something that University of Illinois and other land grant institutions have put a lot of time and effort into. You can simply just Google Midwest Cover Crop Tool, and that thing is very user friendly, and it gives you an opportunity to prioritize 3 goals for your cover crop. I think that's something that producers and the conversations that I've had, I generally am talking to livestock producers and they want to produce feed. But for a row crop farmer, they may just be looking for simply reducing soil erosion and reducing maybe impacts from weeds or weed control. And so knowing your goals is really important when you're selecting a cover crop mix. And that tool is really good at helping you decide what's best.
You know, I learned over the years just by listening to you folks that for those who do haying, they kind of understand the nutritional value and when they need to harvest and some of the things that have to happen, they need to do some measurements in that process. How much different is it for cover crops, and are there things that growers should be utilizing?
Well, I agree with your comment totally. Most farmers know what to kind of expect on grass hay or alfalfa hay, or they've probably been making hay off some same or similar acreage for their farming career. But now on the cover crop side of things, and especially when we talk about maybe some of these blends and mixes, it is going to be extremely variable. And so not as consistent as maybe what farmers are used to putting up in terms of forage. So with that variability, it's really important that we get a nutrient analysis done. So just take a simple forage sample, either a core of a few bales or just grab a grab sample out of the windrow and get a nutrient analysis sent off on it. Because some of these crops, the grasses are probably fairly similar, but when we start to put like brassicas and legumes and different things into some of these cover crop mixes, we can have a lot of difference in what that nutritional value may be. So the first and foremost, the easiest thing to do is just take a sample, send it off. An NIR forage analysis is roughly $20 to $30. Great return on investment to know what's there. Common sense stuff, though, is forage maturity is going to lend to the quality and nutritional value of any forage, right? So when it's really vegetative, it's going to be pretty high in protein and energy, and as it matures and gets older, the plant is going to reduce the amount of protein and energy that's available in it as it lignifies and goes reproductive. So if we're trying to maximize yield and quality, just like producing grass hay, we want to target that boot stage of the plant. And some of these small grains, many refer to that as the early dough stage, or even as far up as the flag leaf stage. That would be kind of the prime window to cut and harvest most of these. And then if we're grazing, we may need to look at what kind of stage of production our animals are in. If we're trying to get really good gains or max gains, we may want to harvest that cover crop in a more vegetative state and supplement it with some dry matter and energy. If we're just trying to keep a dry beef cow, we can let it get a little more mature, knowing that we don't need quite the forage quality to maintain a dry beef cow, and we can maximize tonnage that way. So there's some considerations there. The biggest thing is test so you know what you have.
What management recommendations would you, Travis, give to a row crop farmer with livestock who is looking to diversify their feeding option with cover crops?
Yeah, I think so. Cover crops give a great opportunity if we're growing forage on our farm. It's adding livestock or bringing livestock back to the farm to harvest that forage. It makes sense. And I think if producers put their nose in the literature any, they'll see that animal interaction with these cover crops is part of the secret to the soil health benefits. And so getting animals back out on maybe some of that row crop acreage, or at least running it through livestock and then applying the manure back to that land, that's part of the secret too. But grazing and extending the grazing season, especially extending the grazing season, has always been one of the secrets to being profitable in a cow calf enterprise. And so if there's row crop farmers that already have a small cow calf herd, the less days they have to start a tractor and feed hay or buy supplemental feed to feed those cows, the more those cows can be out grazing and harvesting their own feed and utilizing those farm grown feeds, the more profitable in general those operations are. For those that are going to make dry hay out of some of this cover crop, obviously there's some opportunity in the dry hay market to utilize that product for some revenue for the farm. And then a lot of producers are probably, as we get later into the fall, looking at a silage or a baleage harvest of some of these cover crops if they choose not to graze them. It's important then if we're going to make baleage or silage that we hit our dry matter targets. So with silage, we can be at the 35 to 40% dry matter at times, but our baleage window probably needs to be 40 to 60% dry matter with our target around 50%. Making good silage and good baleage can provide a lot of really high quality feed for animals on the farm. But if we make it poor, or we get it too late, or the moisture window is not right, or we don't get it packed, we allow some higher levels of oxygen penetration into our silage pile or our bales, and we get poor fermentation, that can be a headache and a hassle and reduce the feed value. So there's a lot of things that go into thoughts there. I would just ask row crop farmers to think about looking across the fence. There's a lot of their neighbors already doing this just for the soil health and the soil erosion benefits of cover crops. Think about adding livestock, and then that's when the dollars and cents really start to rake in, because those animals can utilize that. We can put gain on livestock or maintain our beef cows and still have the benefits that row crop farmers are probably already capitalizing on for these cover crops. One other comment that I would just make is that we touched on a little bit, but grazing and extending the grazing season can be a big money saver for a cow calf operation. And when many producers may be looking at maybe something as simple as cereal rye for a cover crop, and harvesting that cereal rye in the form of silage or baleage in the spring has got very popular with livestock producers, and incorporating that into growing rations or backgrounding cattle rations and beef cow rations really seems to work out. And it's pretty nice, I think, mentality wise for a livestock producer to have a fair amount of feed made at the very beginning of the season. And so not having to rely on our summer hay harvest or baling late season or corn stalks, to have a lot of feed put up at the beginning of the year is a really just settling feeling mentally, to know that, hey, I've got forage in the bag when we get to mid-May. That's a nice feeling for livestock producers.
Travis Mateer is an Illinois Extension educator specializing in beef production. Dean Oswald is a retired Extension specialist and now works for Midwest Grass and Forage out of Macomb, where he is a grazing specialist. So you've been doing this for a long time, and you've been working with beef cattle and other livestock, trying to develop ways to include cover crops and forages into operations. Can you tell me about how this has evolved over the years in Illinois?
Yes. Cover crops have a long history in Illinois, and actually farmers have been using cover crops as a forage. It actually began before we had commercial nitrogen, and livestock producers typically used alfalfa and clovers in a long rotation before they planted their corn. So often they had barley, oats, wheat, or cereal rye, and used it as a cover crop or a nurse crop for the legumes that they produced. They used the legumes for livestock feed, also used the straw from the cereal crop in their livestock operations. So as we developed and used commercial nitrogen, the use in the long rotations actually decreased, and we went to the corn-soybean route. And during the 90s, then, I would say that U of I Extension livestock educators were working with producers to encourage the use of more cover crops, manage grazing, and extending the grazing season. And that's where we started to see more the use of the cover crops, actually before we even heard of nutrient loss reduction strategies. So now we can provide high quality forages by using cover crops and reduce nutrient loss at the same time by keeping those cover crops out there over bare fields.
Interseeding of cover crops this fall. You've done some work with that kind of thing. Can it increase forage quality?
Yeah, I think if we look at the forage situation that we've had, especially this year, we're coming off of 2 years of forage shortage. And actually, we've used a lot of cover crops in the spring for livestock producers to try to find additional forage for their herds. This year we had, as you know, a very wet spring, and the amount of good quality feed has been really reduced. We had increased tonnages with first cutting, but the quality was very poor in most cases. Then the second cutting was kind of light because a lot of it ended up in that first cutting because of late harvest. So if we utilize some interseeding into standing crops like corn, we can have some high quality forage produced yet this fall. Cover crops as a whole, if they are harvested sometime before November as grazing or as baleage, can be extremely high quality feed with proteins up to 30%. Actually, they can be very high quality forages. So we've got poor quality first cutting, short second cutting. We don't know exactly what the third cutting is going to be. We've experienced a drought in about a third of the state. We're near drought in the central and northwestern Illinois. So we haven't had as much growth there as we'd like to have. And this year we have the additional problem of the prevent plant acres, and those can be used if you wait until after September 1st, which is another issue. But timing is everything, and getting the covers planted at the right time. And the right time may not have been August 1 when the deadline came up for getting paid for those acres, but something we have to deal with. And what we have left now is probably the best time for cover crop planting is right now as we're speaking. We've had a little rain this last week. If we go ahead and get those covers put on, we can utilize some of the, probably the most available would be the spring oats and winter cereal rye, possibly some turnips or radishes, that type of brassica. But our supplies of other species are really limited this year because of the early draw in the system for prevent plant acres and beef producers trying to find additional forage early in the spring.
Dean Oswald is a grass and forage specialist out of Macomb, Illinois. Terry Wiscala is here as well. He's a soil fertility specialist with Wiscala Consulting out of Southern Illinois. Terry, thanks for being with us. Can you talk a little bit about a project you've been collaborating with Illinois Farm Bureau on in Clinton County, Illinois?
Yeah, back in 2015, the Illinois Farm Bureau board met, and they I had to get a paper from Lauren Larkins on this, and they committed $100,000 toward what they called a nutrient stewardship grant program. And what that was set up to do is offer financial assistance to the individual county farm bureaus or groups of counties that wanted to get together and implement local projects to help address ag's role in Illinois as far as our farmers being good nutrient and land stewards, as well as trying to help address these issues we face with water quality. So it all started at the state level and trickled down to the county level. And I was brought in as a technical advisor and a guy that does a lot of the work and that for Clinton County Farm Bureau because I've had customers there and some long relationships with board members and Farm Bureau members in the county as well. So our project is, which probably will lead into your second question here, our project has been about cover crops and manure management because Clinton County is one of our largest dairy counties in the state, and we have a lot of animal manure to utilize in that county. And so we took the approach of educational awareness.
Your target audience is dairy producers then?
Predominantly, which when you look at Clinton County, I would say 70% of the county is dairy producers in that Farm Bureau membership. You know, we do have some beef in the county and large swine operations, but you know, so it's targeting the livestock operators in particular, and especially the small and medium-sized livestock operations, because face it, the big ones are under state and federal scrutiny, and in order for agriculture to progress forward in the future, everybody's got to be involved with this water quality issue, you know, facing all of our watersheds in Illinois all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. So that's where we came in with this educational awareness approach. So
how long have the projects been going on?
This letter came out in 2015, and we submitted our project proposal in 2016, and I don't know whether they like our project upstate or what, but we've been the only one fortunate enough to be renewed 3 times. So we're on year 4 of this project.
And what is it, and what kinds of things have you discovered along the way?
Well, each year we try to do something different. We're trying to bring in some bigger names outside of our arena, you know, just not having a bunch of county people and regular farmers talking to the other growers. But we talk about cover crops, manure management. I think I sent you a letter that had our list of collaborators. You may or may not have seen that, but we do a lot of work with Kaskaskia College and their students coming and helping on this project. And as far as the educational and outreach, we put out strip trials for different cover crops. We have soil pit digs every year, and we allow we put the invite out to local high schools to come in and use the soil pit for preparation for soils judging in the fall. And we never have quite hit that one quite right as far as being able to get a bunch of kids out there at one time. But then we look at how these cover crops operate below the soil surface, so the farmers can actually see that. Those that are on the fence that are considering starting to use cover crops, and then we have some stuff in the field days that are a little more advanced for those that are utilizing the cover crops to improve soil health, improve water quality, and in Clinton County we're utilizing these covers as another feed source for the dairy cows. I mean, it's working very, very well on many operations where we're using an annual ryegrass or cereal ryegrass as the first forage crop, and we double crop it with corn silage. That's the rotation on these fields. And then we manage the manures in around the planting of the covers and the corn silage.
So these are strategies, management strategies that producers can and maybe should, in your opinion, implement already.
Yes, I mean, they can implement it. We're planting the seed, so to speak, for them to get interest. And then we have a whole host of regional experts that can help them along so they can start small in the cover crops, get a feel for them, and progress and advance into more, I won't say difficult, but more advanced scenarios as far as cover crop mixes and that. Because it's just like going back years ago to no-till, switching away from the moldboard plow. You have to start small with cover crops because one failure can put a producer off of cover crops forever. And there are successes and there are failures, but we have good support people through the county to help with if we have a bit of an issue or a failure, just so the producers just don't walk away from it and say, well, I'm not trying that again. Because it's something that takes time. It's just about like anything new in agriculture. It takes time for adoption, and you have to work through the good with the bad.
So what management strategies can livestock producers implement to reduce nutrient loss in local water bodies?
Well, what we've done in the county, and this was a lot of assistance from the kids at Kaskaskia College, we took and get manure samples collected and actually do manure analyses versus using book values. And we have offered that through the county to all of the members in the county for free manure analyses that's paid out of this grant. And then we went out and did physical spreader calibrations in the field versus using those book values, because you'll get a new piece of equipment and it will have a spreader value, so many tons per acre is being applied if it's a litter spreader at such and such RPM speed with your tractor. Well, when we did the physical calibrations, the book values were telling us anywhere from 3 to 4 ton per acre was being applied at the settings on the spreader and the tractor. With the physical calibration, we had values that could range anywhere from 7 to maybe up to 12 ton per acre. So there were situations where we had over application by using book values. So, we're stressing, calibrate your spreader, do a manure analyses, and then look at those nitrogen and phosphorus best management practices. With that manure analysis, you can credit the nitrogen and phosphorus being applied to that field and then deduct those values from any supplemental dry commercial fertilizers that may be needed. And then to go along with those BMPs, we try to encourage the farmers to use adequate but not excessive rates of nitrogen and phosphorus. That helps with water quality. And one thing about manures, crop plants need about 6 units of nitrogen for every 1 unit of phosphorus. When we apply manures, we're applying anywhere from 2 to 3 units of phosphorus with every 6 pounds of nitrogen. So when we apply at that nitrogen rate, we're already over-applying phosphorus. So through educational awareness, we get them to reduce the rates a little bit. And yes, we have to use some supplemental commercial nitrogen fertilizer, but in the long run, that's better for water quality.
That's Terry Wascala. He's a soil fertility specialist with Wascala Consulting out of Southern Illinois. You've been listening to the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Podcast. I'm U of I Extension's Todd Gleason.